So, I guess I'm back to talking about this again. Well, not again, but there was still more I wanted to talk about. And there is actually a good reason why that I waited until now to continue this series of videos. For starters, after 3 days of not talking about the things I normally do, I'm already really far behind. So, it gives me an opportunity to catch up, or housekeeping, if you will. And more importantly, I need to explain what happened on this very day 13 years ago. Or, in this case, 17 years and 6 days to the very day that I stopped contemplating suicide. Now, for context, after Trinity Pauling, I was in that place where, okay, I'm not going to do suicide, but I have no direction. I barely have any idea what I'm doing. The only thing I knew I had to do was, go to college. Because, that was the natural progression. After you graduate, well, the real natural progression is high school, then college. But, Trinity Pauling, after me was Trinity, after it was high school, then Trinity Pauling, then college. And I can tell you right now, in college, I was not the greatest of students. Now, I want to make one thing clear. I like to believe I made a lot of good choices in terms of, not going out and partying every day. I always got my homework done. I always went to all of my classes. And in many cases, I was the first in class. You guys know me, I value promptness. My real problem, though, is, for me, and it might have to do with the whole pragmatic communication disorder thing, I'm the kind of guy where I will always do a task when I'm told to do it. And I will do my best to get the job done. But when time is up or it's over for the day, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to do it. It's over with. In the case of college, while yes, I did do all my homework, I did go to all my classes, I never made any crazy bad decisions like going out and partying every day, I didn't like to read, and I really didn't like to study. So, to say that getting through college was a bit of a hassle for me, and that's putting it mildly. For reference, my major was health sciences. I'll get back to that in a bit. And I had to retake pretty much the basic 200 level course because it did so horrible the first time I took it. For those of you who don't know, health science is the human body, anatomy and physiology, stuff like that. And you get into stuff like public health, nutrition, kinesiology, which was the final health course I took. Things of that. Oh, exercise physiology. Those are the 300 level classes I took. Anyway, so fall semester senior year, I have to retake anatomy and physiology 1. Because that was the one I did bad in. I did a lot better in anatomy and physiology too, but one I did not so great in. Anyway, so honestly, of all the classes I was most worried about, it was the first one. Because that was, let's be real here, because of my not very great studying habits, I dug myself into a hole. Which was especially satisfying when, on this day 13 years ago, I got myself out of that hole. Because I wound up getting an 89 on my anatomy and physiology final. I was gonna, leave the course with like a B plus or something. I don't even remember. Listen, I only got like 2 A's in college altogether. One was my capstone, the other was introduction to dance. I couldn't possibly tell you what my other grade. Oh, some grades I could probably tell you what were. Getting sidetracked here. And I remember looking at my grade for the course, and I'm just like, oh, where are you at? Where are you at? Where are you at? Like, I remember, later on that day, I went to my father's shop to see my family and tell my dad the good news and stuff. Like, at this point, unless I really screwed up second semester senior year, I was going to graduate. However, that same day, again, 13 years ago, I wound up hearing news that I never thought I'd ever hear. Now, when I was at Trinity Pauling, the loss of Andrew Einstein hurt us all in a lot of ways. I mean, there's a reason why I still talk about it even today. But it was on this day I got a real glimpse of what does really happen in life when you really could be on top of the world. Again, you passed a course that you gotta take and pass or graduate. And how that joy really can be taken away from you when you learn that someone you know also dies. In this case, his name was Sean Bertanza. And believe me when I tell you that things are going to get pretty crazy in a minute. Now, I told you in my video on a week ago that, Andrew Einstein was my cross-country teammate. And guess what? So was Sean Bertanza. Now, Sean, also a very nice guy, he was from Connecticut, and his main sport was basketball. Now, if my terminology is correct, because I'm still not the greatest, basketball knowledgeable person, and if I actually remember what he did, I believe he was a shooting guard. Like, he was the one who would score, 3-point shots. Which, funny enough, Sean was also in my English class, who was taught by my wrestling coach, believe it or not. And I'll never forget how one afternoon, we're all in English class, and we made a bet about a very distinguishing characteristic about Sean, which, for those of you who don't know, Sean Bertanza had an afro. I mean, not to sound bad or anything, but he was white, so I think it might be considered a Jufro. I don't really know how it works. I wouldn't know, so if I got anything wrong, I very much apologize. But everyone was making bets on how if he wasn't 5 for 9 in 3-pointers, like, he would have to shave off the afro. And I personally thought it was a bad idea, because back when Sean did cross country, and here's the thing, like, they had like clubs at Trinity Pauling, and he and another person did the running club, but they both thought, what's so different about this in cross country? So he basically shows up to the cross country team like halfway through the season. And at this point, I had finally established myself as being a member of the top 7. That's when you're considered varsity. And sure enough, Sean was an incredible runner too. So I really had to fight tooth and nail to stay on the top 7, which I did. I believe, again, It was the afro. It was the I still believe it was the afro that made Sean as good of an athlete as he was, because afros really give you that kind of power. I'm serious. That's what happened. That's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Um, Obviously, I wasn't the only postgraduate on that team. Andrew Einstein was a postgraduate, Sean Bertanza was a postgraduate, and there were several others. But that year for Trinity Pauling Cross Country, there were 3 postgraduates that were on the top 7. As of this day, 13 years ago, only one of them is still alive. Yeah. It really puts things into perspective of how, no longer thinking about suicide, can lead to. Because, as I said the other day, there have been a lot of really great things in my life that have happened that obviously wouldn't have happened if I wasn't alive anymore. I got to graduate from college. I got to see my brother get married and form a family. I got to run 4 marathons. The list goes. I get to make these videos. Shout out to Kristen Bell in her episode of Hot Ones yesterday, as this video is recorded. But it doesn't come without bad memories either. I unfortunately have met some very extraordinary people in my life, family and friend alike, and it really is just heart-wrenching when they wind up passing on. So, given the title of this video, the most important thing that I have learned in these now 17 years and 6 days is life is precious and it is always worth living for. But if there was ever a word to really describe what it is, it'd be bittersweet. As in, you literally can't have the sweet without having the bitter, and vice versa. For every great day you have for, wrestling, if you do that, you hear about someone who, actually does commit suicide. For every time you hear someone do well in college, you hear someone pass on due to, at the time, unknown health reasons. Again, at the time, I actually didn't know how Sean had passed away. It wouldn't be until years later, as I was actually doing these videos, because before I got hacked on Facebook, I was friends with his mom, and his mom actually told me what had happened, because I had learned that he had died in his sleep, but I didn't know. I was a health science major. Of course, I was curious about how. I mean, you don't die in your sleep without a reason, right? And it was his mom who told me that he had something called Wolff-Parkinson's White syndrome. Now, if you don't know what that is, and honestly, I'm still not the most knowledgeable about it either. It's basically a condition where you naturally have a very weak heartbeat. And in Sean's case, it really was only a matter of time until his heart would, unfortunately, give out. In this case, he passed on in his sleep. So, at the time I thought to myself, As a health science major, I was curious as about what the actual cause was. But if I went my entire life not knowing, I'd be okay with that too. And it was at that point where I knew that there was now not one, but two very important items that I still have on my life's bucket list to this very day. And that is, I would go to Connecticut and South Carolina for both Sean Bertanza and Andrew Einstein, respectively. I would go to wherever their grave site is, and I would place a bouquet of flowers, specifically the state flowers of each of their respective states. For the state of South Carolina, for those of you who don't know, for example, the state flower of New York is the red rose. In South Carolina, the state flower is the yellow jessamine, which is actually a very pretty flower. If you have an opportunity to look it up, it's a very pretty flower. And speaking of pretty flowers, the state flower of Connecticut and Pennsylvania, so two states, is the mountain laurel, which is, again, also a very pretty flower. So, at some point in my life, I do want to go to Connecticut where, Sean is buried. And I would like to go to South Carolina where Andrew is buried. I would get a bouquet of both of those flowers I just mentioned for each of their respective states. I would place it onto their gravesite, because that's what you do when you bring flowers to a gravesite. And I know exactly what I would say, because it's a blessing that is very near and dear to my heart, which has to do with the fact that, yes, I am Irish. I would go up to their grave sites, place the flowers on them, and I would say, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall softly on your fields. And until we meet again, may the Lord hold you in the palm of his hand. I'll be honest, I'm actually kind of surprised I got through that part without crying. Because in the past when I told this story, I actually have cried at this part. Watch, it might hit me off camera, I don't know. So yeah. The most important thing I can say that I have learned in these last 17 years and 6 days is life may be bittersweet, but it will always be worth living for. Because, and granted, your results may vary on this. Lord knows that I'm different from everybody else in many, many, many ways. The good in my life has vastly outweighed the bad. And I am very happy that I get to say that. I'm going to repeat that. I get to say that the good things in my life You know, everything I've done in my life, all of my accomplishments, all the places I've been to and seen, the times where I've laughed my hardest, the times I've cried my hardest, the times I've celebrated the hardest. And all of the people that I am both very blessed and privileged that I've gotten to meet and know. It's all worth living for. And for that reason, it's actually why with each passing year, I find telling these videos, specifically this series of videos, while still very emotional, I get a little more comfortable being able to say. Because, well, I mean, a simple answer would be at this point, I'm kind of numb to the emotion. But for something a little more sincere and more heartfelt, it makes me very happy that I'm still here. My life may not be perfect, but it's definitely a whole lot better than the alternative. So, at this point, I probably would mention that if you're watching this on YouTube, do what you're supposed to do to, like and subscribe and everything. But for once, I'm just gonna skip to the thing I've been saying the most, which was I am beyond humbled that I get to share this story with all of you today. I am very hopeful that you take this story, you learn from it, and maybe you can apply it to your life in some way. And if anyone ever wants to talk or, needs to vent, I'm certainly here, and I'll definitely be here to listen. So, have a nice day, everyone. And in the words of one of the best teachers I ever had at Horseheads, make good choices.